Okay, hi everybody. So you're doing your first session in Logic Pro X. So the first thing I'm going to do is open the program. And something that often trips people up when they're first using Mac computers is that they'll click on Logic and they think nothing's happening. So the first thing you want to do is, if it opens no windows, is look to the top left hand corner. You'll see that Logic Pro X is open. So then you can go to File and New Project. There will be a range of templates, but we're just going to go with the empty project, so we can double click on that. And then we're presented with this menu, which will enable us to create our tracks. So for the time being, I'm just going to create a software instrument track and leave it there. Now, something you want to keep your eyes on is at the right hand side and left hand side of the screen. If you get these brown wooden bars, it means that Logic's in a restricted mode, so a lot of the more advanced features are hidden from you. And the more you use Logic, the more you'll realise just what is hidden from you. So what we're going to have to do is go up to our preferences. So we go to Logic Pro X, preferences, and we're going to go straight to the advanced tools. We need to show the advanced tools, and then click at the bottom, enable all. And then we'll notice that these brown bars at the sides have now disappeared. Now, a few other things you can do within the preferences is, if you've got different audio interfaces, you're using external equipment, this is where you'll be able to select them. So you'll see that my input device is my EIE Pro, and my output device is currently the multi-output device. That's so that it sends to my headphones, and it's also being recorded for this video as well. So that's where you can select them. So let's have a look at the different areas of Logic then. So this main area here is called the arrangement window, or the arrangement area. And that's where you will see, you see bar numbers, you will add MIDI clips or audio clips, and arrange and structure your track. Up on the top left hand side here, there's a few options, and I can even enable the help so that it tells me what everything is. So we see this eye, and that opens the track inspector, where you can see a basic sort of mixer area for that particular track. So I can turn up the volume, I can change the panning from left to right. Also up here, I've got my library. So if I wanted a different sound, let's say for instance, I'm going to change this to a marimba. That's where I can do that. Other tracks with other options we've got up here as well. We've got our mixer view, again where we can change the volumes and pans and see all of the channels at once. And there's also editors and smart controls. Get more into them in the future. So I'm just going to hide the mixer and the library for now. And let's have a look at adding some tracks. So if you use this plus button here, you'll get the new track menu. So let's add in an audio track for now, and that's where any audio, any external interfaces would come in, or if you wanted to use some samples, you'd have to pop it onto an audio track. The external MIDI and the guitar and bass we're not going to use too much just yet, but I'll draw your attention to the drummer. Now the drummer is a really cool feature in Logic. It's a crossover between MIDI and audio. So it's using MIDI, but it's actually creating the drum beats for you. So I'd selected electronic then. If I go into the library, I can select different styles and different types of drummers. So there's a few to choose from each genre. So I'm going to stick with electronic, but I'm going to change it to Leah, the tech house drummer. Hide my library. Oops. And then we'll see it's populated the first 8 bars with a drummer track. So let's have a quick listen to that. So straight away we've got a drum beat that we can work with. I'm going to loop this section. So we'll see this like grayed out box at the top. If I click on that, it turns yellow, and that means it's going to loop in that area. I can extend it to 8 bars, and if I needed to, I can move that around as well. Now, if you can't see it, or if you're in let's say you're in a different part of your project, the cycle or the loop region isn't there, you can click and drag in the numbers on the top, and that will also create your loop. And again, clicking on it or pressing C to turn it on and off. I'm now going to add what's called a MIDI region to this MIDI track by right-clicking in the arrangement window and creating an empty MIDI region. I'm just going to make this 2 bars long. I'm going to loop it in a second. Now, if I double click on the MIDI region, it opens up what's called the piano roll at the bottom, and this is where we draw in or edit our MIDI notes. Now, what Logic does to give you the tools is you have a left click tool available and a command click tool available. So by default, that's the pencil. So you'll see that if I'm in the MIDI region or the piano roll, if I hold command, that swaps to a pencil. So I'm just going to draw in a few chords, and I can highlight them and extend them. So as you can see there, I can select a note and drag it up or down. And it gives me a little box that will tell me what note it's on. So that's on an A sharp number 2. And again, we can change the lengths of these. And down in the bottom left corner here, we can change the velocity. So that makes the individual notes louder or quieter. Other things I can do within the MIDI area is quantized notes. So let's say that I'd recorded these, they were all a little bit skew-if, I've played them in by hand, with the keyboard, sorry. You can see they're all just a little bit off the line. So if I select everything and press this Q button up here, it will snap them to the nearest available line. I'm going to change that to 8th notes though, just so that it gets them a little bit more accurate. There we go. So let's have a listen to that then. Press space or play up here. And so I can loop this at the top by grabbing the top right hand corner of that MIDI region, and that will just loop it. Or a slightly better way of doing this is by holding Alt and dragging this along. So that makes different copies of it so that I can then go in and edit each one of these MIDI regions individually. So I'm going to switch that F there up to an F up here, just so that that one has got a little bit of variation. Okay, so some other tools that you might want to use. Let's focus on the MIDI area for now. I'm going to change my command tool. So I've got things like the eraser, scissors if I wanted to split some notes in half. I've got a velocity tool so that I can change the velocity of individual notes by clicking on them and dragging up or down. The zoom tool is a little bit fiddly sometimes, but things like the glue tool are very useful. Let's say I wanted to glue these two back together. There we go. I'm going to undo that though. And within the arrangement window, I've got a couple of different tools such as fades and tools to do with flex and mute and solo. So let's have a look at the mute tool. So that means that these two MIDI regions are no longer going to play. Good for like deciding on your structure and stuff. I'm going to have that on the scissors, and I could chop this drummer region in half. There we go. Okay, so some other areas in Logic you might want to look at is over on the right hand side here, we've got file browsers. So this is where I would select my samples or any other sort of audio files I wanted to drop in. And we've also got the Apple Loops area. So we can listen to the loops, we can filter them by instrument. So let's have a look at some percussion. I'm going to stick that conga groove in there as well into this audio track. And again, just as I did with the MIDI, I'm going to hold Alt and drag these around to copy them. Cool, and I'll hide that area. Now you might not know at this point what the difference is between MIDI and audio. So audio is something that's already recorded, and there's not too much you can do to change that. So if it sounds like a guitar, it's going to sound like a guitar forever, really. Or in this case, a conga. Whereas with MIDI, this data in the piano roll is just telling the computer what notes to play. So if I open my library back up, I can then change that sound and the notes will remain the same. So let's swap it to piano and strings. And there we go. So combining this with some other resources to teach you what the chords are and how you can create chord progressions and stay within a key, that should then give you everything you need to start your first session in Logic. What I'd recommend is, unless you've got some experience creating drum beats, I would add a drummer track just to get yourself going, and then try and add in a basic chord progression using some resources from your teacher or from my other videos about music theory.